We are recording this. I'm going to start with a brief introduction. I'm Bill Sharp. I'm a member of both Transition Towns and School of Living, and I've been a sustainability activist for quite some time. And my topic tonight is going to be on something called 10% local food. So with that, I'm going to get into it. I'd like to welcome all of you here in at Stella Lou, and also all of my friends over in New Jersey. We're about 100 miles apart, but we're a lot closer now. So what I'm going to do is about a 12-minute opening presentation, and then we're going to do some breakout groups. Howard has the questions on for the breakout group. I'm going to stick pretty much to the script, so you'll have to pardon me for doing that, but you all know that if I don't stick to the script, I will ad-lib. Okay, so 10% local food. All of you have been hearing about this a little bit. So let's start out with the question of why do we want 10% local food? Why is that idea important? In brief, it is the start of creating a robust, resilient, healthy food system that will feed everybody in your community. Saying that, the opportunity, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. What I'm offering tonight is not a finished plan, barely a plan at all. It's an idea that is attracting some interest. All of you are here. And it's an idea that must grow and evolve before we can actualize it. So, in terms of actualizing it, we're looking at in the future. But one of the things I'd like to suggest is that the opportunity for demonstrating this could occur any time. So one of the questions I want to ask, are we ready now to support this possibility? The second part of the event involves two important organizations that can have profound impact on creating a local food system, which is our group here, School of Living, and you folks with Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub. But I want to start with a brief introduction. The oldest of the two, which is the School of Living, which has been around for about 80 years. It was founded by a man who was actually hailed as the back to the land pioneer in his day. A man who created homesteading communities and a lot of other things. His name was Ralph Bersodi. That organization has a presence today among the people that I'm physically with in 6 communities in 3 states that are in our region. The second is Transition Towns. It's not quite 10 years old, but it is in over 1,000 communities around the world already today. Most particularly, this is addressed to the Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub, the first such hub in the United States of some 24 transition towns in 7 states. And I'm welcoming you guys joining us by Skype tonight. I'm really glad to have you here. For me, membership in both organizations come out of founding our transition town, actually during meetings at a School of Living affiliate. I want to suggest a partnership, and I want to emphasize the potential synergy of that partnership, our strength and opportunities that such a partnership can bring. And I want to put this in the context of our mutual challenges, because we share some of those, and how this partnership can transcend them. All of you should have the 10% local food document link. I've sent it out a couple of times. I'm only going to summarize the content of that document tonight. You also should have gotten Flight from the City, A New Century. That document is a summary of the background of the School of Living, of Bersodi's homesteading model, and about a program that could enhance our capacity to be effective change agents. Ralph Bersodi spent his lifetime working on that issue. This is the deep end of the pool, and we'll only get a little bit into that tonight. What I want to concentrate on is 10% local food. It's a project that came out of Transition Town State College, and the basic idea is 10% in 10 years, and that applies to any conceivable sustainable initiative. What it does is give us a framework that we can wrap our minds around. It's not about changing the world, it's not about changing the country, but rather how we start with changing our own community. I start that document, as you can see, with a page of bulleted points about what building a local food economy can do for us and for the world. One point I want to emphasize is that it can absolutely change your local economy. It is the entry point for creating a local and sustainable economy, in fact. It's about keeping our money at home so we can use it to transform the way that we live. It's about ending inequity, food insecurity, poverty, and a lot more. When I think in terms of 10%, I can quickly get some basic facts about the local food system from convenient sources. How much food is currently farmed from table? As I indicated, actually less than 0.5% across the country. Where do we get our food? From the grocery store, from sources across the country and around the world. And how much food is actually raised locally and what happens to it? Well, it's mostly cash crops. Much of it is used for animal fodder and not a little bit of it is used for biofuel stock. What are the alternatives? There are a lot of them around the country. The one that caught my attention was Will Allen's Growing Power. And what I like about that was his high-density urban food production. Something came together when I began to study this. So let me summarize those. Transition Towns is about creating a resilient community. There is a lot of emphasis on the local food economy. The School of Living is about homesteading. Again, that is about food self-sufficiency. The Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub is mostly located around the coastal cities. Sandy was a wake-up call. It's not so much about the food system, but about the level of vulnerability of these cities and their people. A local food system provides greater security for these populations. It creates community, it gives people a sense of self-reliance. The School of Living is about flight from the city, but how many of us can do that? But the homesteading model is about breaking the rules about food production. I had to ask, is there a model that combines the framework of the Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub, the School of Living, and what I saw in Will Allen's Growing Power? This comes down to two tracks. First is to develop urban community and suburban home gardens, and that's something that's immediately doable. Second is to develop a high production micro farm, an adaptation of the School of Living homestead, feeding 20 to 30 people per acre of land. High production micro farming is important because the land around our cities is expensive and the taxes are very high. We have to have a food production model that is first and foremost economically feasible. I believe, particularly with the math group, that I'm talking to people who live mostly in the Philadelphia metropolis, which would be Philadelphia, Camden, and Wilmington. That's the 6th largest metropolis in the country. It's an 11-county region covering 3 states. It has 6 million people, and it covers 5,000 square miles. So it gives you a little perspective of what we're dealing with. There was a Greater Philadelphia Food Shed study done not long ago. It defined the food shed as a radius of 100 miles. Ironically, that radius included all 5 boroughs of New York City. So, as you laugh, it didn't really make sense to me. What I propose in those 11 counties, that those 11 counties are your food shed. A radius of about 50 miles from the Liberty Bell. The population density of the city of Philadelphia is 20 per acre, obviously much higher in the downtown area. It's too dense for much food production in that area. For the 11 county area, it is less than 2 people per acre. Using the high density food production model, and here's where 10% type of thinking helps because we begin to quantify these issues. But using the high density food production model, you need only 500 to 600 square miles to produce all the food needed to feed the entire population. That's 1/10 of the land area of those 11 urban counties. And to achieve 10% local food requires only 1% of the land area of that metropolitan region. Okay, so if it is that easy, why aren't we doing it? This is the exception proves, or a better word is tests the rule. What we've got with our local food system is what the market, the social and economic structure will currently support. There are other exceptions, places that do have 10% local food or high-density agricultural models. But these are demonstration projects that have come out of communities and nonprofits that have in some cases been working for decades. Growing Power, for example, is nearly 20 years old, and it can feed 500 people, or at 10%, 5,000 people, in a city of 2 million people. The models are good, but they don't scale. They work only as far as the money and volunteers go. We've got to scale up dramatically, and I doubt that we have the luxury to procrastinate or wait for somebody else to do it. I know from years of trying to push the envelope that the sustainability, despite its reputation for being the largest movement on the planet, for every step forward it takes 5 back. That is literally true. We've got to come up with a different model. We've got to rethink this. I sent out a link to Steve Jobs' The Crazy Ones, those of you that are on the 2 lists. And I think it's a 1-minute video, and I really recommend you take a look at it. We've got to learn to think outside the box. We've also got to learn to think outside the boundaries that restrict us. And yes, that may take some craziness. Not foolishness, but audacity. Part of my motivation is that I am a local and regional government official, and I have to make decisions about putting agricultural land into development. The reason that happens is because there is no compelling alternative. 10% local food is a compelling alternative. As a municipal official, I understand the rules. I worked in government most of my life. I worked in higher education. I worked in business. I know a lot of rules. There's absolutely nothing about this bunch of rules that in the least discourages me from thinking about how to bust the boundaries of convention. The rules, ironically, provide ample scope for doing just that. Let me give you a couple of examples. There can often be a pickup game in local government. For example, my regional government is developing an organic waste recycling program. In one program, we will eliminate 30% of what goes into the landfill and produce hundreds of tons of compost for sustainable agriculture. Will Allen drives a lot of Growing Power by producing fabulous warm compost from restaurant waste from Milwaukee. I got a report just 2 nights ago at a council meeting, a list of priorities of a regional land use committee that included a proposal for changing zoning regulations to support sustainable agriculture within the urban regional growth boundary. What they are proposing is to enable smaller farms, like yours, under 10 acres, and to restrict housing development on land that's zoned agriculture, and there is a lot of it in the growth boundary. These 2 local initiatives give incredible leverage to 10% local food, and they are the type of things that can be found in almost any community around the country. Both of our organizations, the School of Living and the Mid-Atlantic Transition Hub, have projects, and we have principals, and we have good people. Both of our organizations are struggling, I think, just to survive. We have to change our rules if we are going to make a difference in this life. The job we have immediately before us to build a robust food system is to work through this idea, define the obstacles, propose the innovations, and vastly increase the number of people who are engaged. 10% is in 10 years. For now, we start with a lot of small projects. A lot of seedlings turn a solid mountainside into rubble. Each is a little living wedge that grows. A community garden on a city lot, a backyard garden, suburban garden that produces a quarter of a family's food, or a little learning garden of a few beds in a city park are little living wedges. But they have to be connected to a larger idea, something you can evangelize. A much more robust local food system can be good news. I'm asking you to join me to do that. 10% local food is about living wedges. It starts with a lot of little things that we can do, but in order to make a difference, what is going to happen is we have to grow a movement. We have to come together. And that starts here, and it starts with us. Basically, we've got a lot of points of light, and we need to connect them. We need a common vision, we need to create a common community, and we need to create a sense of we in capital letters. So this concludes the formal part of my presentation. And what I would like to do next is, rather than have questions and answers between you and me, is for us to break up into groups of 4. And there's going to be 3 questions that I'm going to ask, one at a time. And what I would like you to do is form your groups of 4, and in a course of 8 minutes, talk about the question. And one of you needs to summarize what you're doing. And then after the 8 minutes, we'll take 2 minutes or so for the groups to very briefly, in just a few sentences, report what the focus of their conversation was about. So with that, groups of 4, 1 or 2 less is okay, for 8 minutes, followed by a report period that we'll share with everybody in the 2 groups. I hope we'll get them both on Skype. And the first question is, what part of this program most attracts your interest? Okay, with that, we break up and go to work.
Okay.
8 minutes, and I'll call you back to order.